feel-good modern fantasies aside, violence is an innate part of human nature. The earliest human skeletons show evidence of interspecies violence. Just as soon as Eve begat Cain, Cain turned around and murdered Abel. Additional evidence to our history of violence and war is littered across our textbooks. For 8,000 years of recorded history, the kings of earth have fought a perpetual series of wars, often for the same territory, and often for no other reason than the individual ruler's personal vanity. 8 out of 10 human kingdoms have been sacked by other humans, with gallons of blood spilled for usually arbitrary reasons. Underneath this current of war is a likewise disturbing tradition of violent crime that not everybody does, but has continued despite total geographic and philosophical isolation of different human groups. Violence is unfortunately a part of our nature. A variety of scientists and thinkers have postulated on the source of humanity's violent nature. Obviously, we are predatory creatures that ourselves are not particularly impressive physically. To hunt food or defeat other predators, humans have to fight, and fight well. Meanwhile, human psychological frailties like jealousy or frustration seem to incline violent behavior between humans. That's an admittedly pacifistic statement, but I will parse it with a very controversial one. In the natural world, violence isn't an inherently evil characteristic. In a place where everything wants to kill you, a little ferocity is a useful quality. If humans didn't fight, the entire race might have been torn down by dire wolves or saber-toothed cats, rock slides, or simple starvation. Human survival isn't innately good, and it is also not innately evil. Violence for our early ancestors was useful for survival. But if human propensity for violence had a use, it very quickly spiraled out of control. And there lies the epic problem. Humans no longer kill to survive, or proportionally to the threat posed against us. The matter of self-defense is gone, and only occasionally is it in play. Instead, our acts of violence are unjustifiable crimes that have basis only in frustration, envy, unrestrained anger, and in that lies a substantial problem. An undercurrent of human civilization has always been the scourge of violent crime, particularly battery, rape, homicide, torture, ritual sacrifice, and enslavement. Each of these is a vile art, yet what they share is the designed goal of compelling some kind of useful result, or at least a useful result to those committing these unspeakable crimes. Now, often, and in much contrary to what you may be thinking, the primary perpetrator of these crimes in society is actually society itself, state or state-affiliated entities that feel the use of this kind of crime is necessary or justifiable to ensure state or caste power. Secondary to the crimes inflicted by state violence come the crimes inflicted by rogue elements within a society. Criminals, robbers, rogues, highwaymen, bandits, and that sort of thing. A number of sociologists or scientists have theorized as to the cause of this violent nature, often pointing to socioeconomic explanations. However, socioeconomic explanations do not explain the violence committed by the state. Society and economics certainly affect violence, but since criminal violence seems a perpetual calamity, regardless of what tribe or tongue is in power, something exists, or at least is indicated, that our casual preference for violence is somehow innate and must be dealt with by the inspection of self and not just society. I don't really have to say that violent crime needs to stop. That fact is self-evident. The other half of the equation is equally bankrupt, as any tangible results of violence lack value, blood money, as you were. A vast fortune assembled by, say, slavery is indeed real, but it has no ethical value, and it is not something to be proud of. Both the act and the result of violence are morally bankrupt, making the quality itself bankrupt, and as such, it should be purged from the human psyche. Astride from our proclivity for violent crime is the human practice of warfare. War is a little more straightforward than violent crime, and a little more horrible. War was originally developed out of the activities of human hunting parties. Early humans needed to supplement their diet with game, and being terrible individual hunters, humans need to hunt in groups. Warfare developed shortly after, 8,000 years ago. Early warfare was sporadic, indecisive, and non-lethal, but it quickly hardened. A variety of kings, warlords, or bandit chiefs rejected the tame nature of early warfare and intensified it, making it more decisive. Scattered bands became military units or raiding parties with standardized weapons and practices. If things had stagnated or stopped, warfare might have been a more manageable practice of man, but it didn't. The war machine kept turning on, with more destructive weaponry, more intensity, and in the end, more severe consequences. The nations of man continued to one-up themselves in the arm race. Most viewers probably live in societies where war has been hyper-glorified. And that statement is coming from a man who has 2 degrees in military history. So I'll say something about the concept of just war. The concept of just war does indeed exist, and its definitions are quite aptly described by philosophers like St. Thomas Aquinas or Lao Tzu. War can be both useful or justified if fought against a greater evil, or the aggressive war of other humans. But historically, just war is exceedingly rare, and overshadowed instead by vastly unjust wars designed instead to gain territory, conquer and rape the entire landmass of Asia, addict China to opium, sacrifice people to the sun god, or secure living space for the Aryan race. But if war is ethical folly, humans have certainly hoisted substantial importance on it. For a majority of our history, the borders we live in, languages we speak, and flags we salute have been defined almost wholly by the battles that we fight. The struggles of strong arms and strong wits on distant battlefields are deeply influential on the lives of millions, defining our societies and altering the lives of people who are usually completely uninvolved in the battles themselves. To the victor go the spoils, and unfortunately the victor is usually not the more moral man. Enter the long and sad history of oppression and war crimes that have plagued humanity. Eons of violence previously discussed, though this time in mass, and often without consequence. If a person can be violent, people together can be exceptionally homicidal, and atrocities enacted as a result of war have been the worst parts of the human condition. War is now so dangerous that it could wipe out all human life and destroy our entire planet. History really doesn't have many skilled generals or war leaders. Meaningful acts of conquest can be accomplished by generalship, but since most generals suck at command, civilizations have resorted to technological innovation to win wars. Spears have become swords, have become Roman legions, Rajput warriors, conquistadors, musketeers, riflemen, tanks, airplanes, and finally nuclear or chemical weapons. Today, human nations could destroy the Earth or another inhabited planet many times over again. This is not a desirable outcome, and it's becoming more of a potentiality as nuclear weapons spread, particularly to small, unstable nations who are likely to use them in regional beefs. Taken together, human violent crime and human warfare are very bleak stains on our species. As a predatory race, they are predictable, but that does not make them justifiable.
The state of violence in man today is probably better than it has ever been, but it is still a glaring problem. If it is not addressed, the symptoms of that problem will only get worse. Just as spears became guns, guns will become death rays, gravity bombs, and explosives strong enough to destroy entire solar systems. All of creation might not welcome humanity, but instead fear it, running and hiding from the race of zealot berserkers with atom bombs. While the great pages of history are often marked by the violences we commit, the individual pages of our lives are often marked by the kindnesses we commit. The idea of kindness is certainly abstract, an indirect prime mover split amongst millions of separate individual acts. Unfortunately, human authors and those patronizing them have not recorded acts of kindness in the same way as they've recorded siege warfare or acts of violence. Kindness seems not to be valued by elites or by those funding elites, but it is valued by everybody else. Kindness exists, and it exists every day. And right now, I encourage you to think about a kind moment in your life to validate my claim. Humans are naturally predatory, naturally violent creatures. It's foolish to deny that fact. But as a sentient species, humans have the ability to fight our instinct, to cancel our programming, as it were. In the case of violence, the logical cure is in fact kindness. Kindness can be distributed at both the personal and social level. Personal kindness cannot ever be legislated or forced, but it can be taught. Human children might be naturally predators, but they don't know that. Through the repetition of kind acts, generosity, patience, and affection, our inclinations towards violence can be selectively bred out of the species. I know it's pretty lame for a grand, pedantic bit of rhetoric in a massive scoping documentary like this to tell you something as simple as to be nice. But that's exactly what I'm telling you to do. Be nice. Be kind. Be affectionate. Be loving. War as a social practice cannot be stopped by simply being nice. As much as I wish it could, kindness cannot affect enough people widely enough to eliminate war. Perhaps when humans evolve to the next level, it can, but for now, a few bad apples will always take up the sword and ruin the bunch. Happily, those opposed to war have a potent deterrent to war, in ironically the form of just war. Humans do not have a right or ethical call to attack others, whether they are humans or alien races. But human societies can defend themselves, and they can defend communities unable or unwilling to defend themselves. Alliances of like-minded peoples seeking peace can continue to grow, defending the global or eventually interstellar peace. This documentary is staunchly opposed to war, but you can't just give someone a hug if you're dead. Belligerent or aggressive nations or belligerent or aggressive species should have their ability to make war neutered. Leaders advocating expansionist war, genocide, or military proliferation should be impeached or removed via a orderly regime change. I cannot definitively say that humans will ever be able to overcome our violent nature. Violence as an art is incredibly deeply seated within our psyche, and as stated, we are naturally predatory and naturally violent creatures. But I certainly have hope that we can. Humans have shown time and time again the ability to override our programming, to change our fate, to change our stars, and in the end, improve ourselves and improve the lives of our children. Through concerted efforts to control and eliminate our violent nature, to channel it only into productive and not destructive pursuits, humans can indeed overcome the greatest of our vices and save not just future generations, but future generations across potentially millions of worlds. From the Scion and the Scourge of violence.